Hi, this is Alan back again, talking this time about a digital storyteller called JayCut. It's cloud-based, it's online, it's free to use. I've liked it because, when you're doing movies, they tend to take a lot of time. They always take more time than you think they're going to do. Um, Kids tend to like them and they want to work on them at home, and you always kind of run into the problem if you're using Movie Maker, they have to have, the files with them even if they can get the software for free. iMovie, kind of similar. Video files can be very large, and you have to have them in the right place, and they have to have the right reference. It lends itself kind of to an online environment because, especially in 50-minute periods, you don't have a lot of time to be able to finish a whole video in one period. And so you either have to reserve the library for a week or allow kids to work on it online. And the other part about being online is that it allows students to work collaboratively, even if they're not in the same place, especially if they're doing kind of a digital story, which I'm going to show you in a second. It's a nice way to do that. They can actually be in the same account at the same time. What I recommend is kind of setting up an account for each group. And so if you have a group of 4 kids, you kind of maybe your last name, period number, and then a group number, P1, G1. And you give them kind of the same password for everybody, and they go in and they can be working on it and they don't forget their password. So here is an example. This is about Beowulf. It's from the 6th graders that we had this past year, and this is what they did. And you'll notice both
Chapter 16,
the narration
These,
and the
recreated
internet
by
pictures they used.
Sarah, Sabrina, Michaela, and JC. Beowulf and his 12 men arrived at the cave that led into the fire drake's den. Wiglaf departed from the 12 men and went into the den with a 6-foot stake in his left hand and a big glove in his right. Wiglaf jumped towards the fire drake and shoved the big stake into its mouth.
So, there's some examples. They did the sounds, they recorded it, through a headset on their computer, but they could have just talked into the netbook as long as they're, have the privacy to do that. Podcasting is a little bit challenging with a whole class. If you can get a quiet room somewhere where they can do the audio, that's the main point. So, JayCut will only open to 1 account per browser, so I'm actually going to swap out of their account into my account. Just to show you an example. So this is what it looks like from the main screen. If you go under My JayCut and hit Create Movie, it'll ask you what language, and then it'll, kind of allow you to create. So, first thing you need to do is populate it with pictures or images. So they can be videos or they can be images. And the way you would add that is going up to the top right-hand corner where it says Add Media. You can go to your PC. You hit next, and then you're going to browse to find pictures. So if you want to find things from the internet, you just have to download them first. And I've already downloaded some, so I'm just going to click on them. You can do multiple ones at once. And then hit open. They'll populate, and then you need to upload them. And so if you get a green checkbox, means it's been uploaded. Doesn't take too long. If they're small internet pictures, if they're your own pictures from a camera, probably take a little bit longer because those are big file sizes. In a couple of seconds, the pictures that I just uploaded should populate. So let's see, here they are. And then I can just drag and drop them. So I can drag them in to this different layer down here, and it gives you 2 different layers. So if you're familiar at all with kind of movie making software, it's nice to have those 2 layers. And what it does is if you want to do a transition, you overlap the layers and put it in between. So let's say I wanted to dissolve, which is kind of a very common transition. I just kind of put it in between, and it will dissolve the part that overlaps. So over here is kind of a preview. So I start with one picture, and after a certain amount of time, it will dissolve into the next one. So that's kind of how you do it. You just kind of drag and drop pictures. You could do the same thing with video. So wherever I want the next picture to be, I can either overlap it or not. And then if I want to create a text layer, I just have to add that here. So if I want it over the words, I can put it there. Um, I can move everything down. I can work on the timing. I can extend if I want to, or shrink it. Figuring out how, and these are the skills that are good for students to start thinking about, how they do things. You can change the font, change its color. So, sample movie. This is 48 right now. I can change the font, and it gives me a preview of that. And I can change the color. So if I previewed it again, it's going to render that and kind of show me the way it looks. So here's my sample movie over here, and then I have that. Oops, I need to move my transition. So if I hit pause, I can move this over, and I should get my dissolve. So, that's kind of, you can add text. It can be on the words or not on the words, as you kind of saw there. The words kind of float over it if you have it overlapping. And then the last part is the audio. So kind of similar to adding images, I can add audio. So I can actually record off the webcam. If kids want to do something right in front of you and you have a webcam enabled camera or computer, or most netbooks, most Macs have that. Most new computers have that. Or I can go to microphone. So if I go to microphone, this is where they can podcast. So they can give it a title. So this is the opening. What microphone are you going to use? Hit next. You're going to allow. And you can kind of test it out. Hey, I'm recording right now. So I'm going to hit record. This was the beginning of a big scary movie. So I just stop it, save it. And where I had no audio before, in a few seconds, here comes my audio. And so all I have to do is drag that to my fourth layer. That's as long as it is. I can copy it again if I wanted it twice. But now, I now have a movie with text, overlaps a little bit on the first picture, audio, and pictures. So here's a preview. This was the beginning of a big scary movie. So here it is, loading, rendering. This was the beginning of a big scary movie. Going from the picture, from the transition, stayed on the words, dissolve, and no transition there. So I can go back and add transitions or what I like. But that's basically how to make a movie. I want to make sure I save it, which it does, and that's kind of the overview of JayCut. Good movie making. Good luck with that.